All right, everybody, welcome to Unscripted One-on-One. And tonight I have another guest in our series in October for breast cancer awareness. And so my guest is LeAnn, and I'm just going to let her introduce herself before we get started.
Hi there, I'm LeAnn Miller, and I don't know what information that you're that you're looking for, but I'm married to my husband Dennis, and we have an 18-year-old daughter named Grace, who is a junior at Hilliard Bradley. And we've been married. It'll be 25 years this year that we've been married. So we've been through a few things in our married life. The not least of which is a battle with breast cancer.
Okay. Well, and you also have a dog.
And we have a very obnoxious barking dog in the background.
So because we're unscripted, we'll just, like I said, we'll roll with it. We all have them, and ours will probably bark before. If somebody walks by, ours will probably bark too. So we'll always navigate that. But welcome, and thank you as well for being willing to do this. And I shared last night with Katie, who was on. My wife, did a great service by on my behalf, reaching out and reaching out to some people she thought whose stories were very powerful and that we could share. And so thank you for being willing to share with this audience, whoever that might be. Thank you for being willing to share your story. So
I appreciate you giving us this forum to do this. I mean, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart in a lot of ways. And so I appreciate you putting this together and giving us this opportunity to bring the awareness to it.
Well, thank you. And I'm, I just want to share the stories because it's awareness for all of us. Whether we're walking through it or not, we all need to be aware that this is, something that people are dealing with, and we don't realize that every day when we go to work that somebody could be carrying something that we don't even know about. So,
absolutely.
So with that, why don't we start with your story? Start with, wherever you want to pick that up, whether it's early on or current or, whatever you feel comfortable with. Can we just start with your story there and we'll go?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I think for me, it all, it started many years ago. My mom was diagnosed for the first time with breast cancer in 1995. We were in the midst of planning a wedding and doing those things. And my mom's sister had been diagnosed in the mid 70s. So it had been a long time, but mom had followed and done what she needed to do. And but she was able to catch it early and had a lumpectomy done and some radiation done and was good to go. And she found a fabulous doctor down here in Columbus and had great success with everything and had no further issues. And then in 2008, she went in for just her general mammogram, her annual exam. She was back to just annuals at that point, and they found a lump on the other side. And so she started down that pathway again, met with the same doctor, and they decided at that point that it was probably prudent to just go ahead and do a bilateral mastectomy and just because of being the recurrence. So they did that, got all the cancer. There was no cancer in the lymph nodes or anything like that. So she wasn't going to require radiation or chemo or anything like that. Surgery went really well, but she opted for a reconstruction with implants. And so they began that process soon after surgery. And her surgery was in December, and in the early part of January, she became very ill, and we discovered that she had an infection in the surgical site from the implants, and she turned septic. And unfortunately, she fought for 13 weeks and lost her battle to sepsis. And so at that point, in the midst of that, I had started treating and started going in for more regular exams just because of the history. And I had my first mammogram when I was 28 years old, just because I had very dense breast tissue, and the doctors felt like it was prudent to start the exams early. So I had been going and having mammograms done occasionally. And after mom's second diagnosis, I thought, I really probably need to get myself set with somebody that focuses more on this rather than just using my OBGYN. So I had just started working for OSU Medical Center in May of that year. Mom's second diagnosis came in November. And so I got in touch with the breast center, the Stephanie Spielman Breast Center, and just kind of told them my story. I talked to my OBGYN, she put a referral in for me. And I started treating with the high-risk breast clinic at the Stephanie Spielman Center. And so they started right away they were doing a mammogram every year, and then every 6 months, I was going in every 6 months. So once they would do a mammogram, then the next time they would do an ultrasound. And they said we probably needed to do an MRI. So we started with that. Because they thought they saw a spot then, so they did an MRI. Turned out to be nothing. So she said, well, let's just continue to treat. So I just was going every 6 months, starting in 2008. In 2015, they found a spot again that they were concerned about. And so we decided to go in and they did a biopsy, and it turned out to be, again, nothing. It was just a spot of tissue, and it wasn't anything to be concerned about. So that, that experience, the first biopsy experience, really was terrifying, because at that point, Mom, we'd already lost Mom. We weren't sure what was, and I was pretty confident that I don't know why, but I was pretty confident at some point in my life I probably would be facing it, just based on the history. And the other thing that kind of increased my chances, ironically, was the fact that I had never given birth. So our daughter is adopted, and I'd never had a pregnancy, and so unfortunately that kind of increases your risks along the way, because you don't get that hormone break in your lifetime. So, but I felt like I was in great hands. They did the biopsy. We got the results fairly quickly. It was nothing, and we were confident that we were in the clear again. So in 2017, my doctor had left the practice. I had started with a new doctor. I met with her, and she said, I don't really see anything going on, but she said, you haven't had an MRI for a year and a half since your last biopsy. I really think we need to do an MRI again. And just to be sure, they couldn't see anything with me in mammograms, and very little in ultrasound, because my tissue was so dense, which just increased the chances even more. So we were just being hyper vigilant with everything we could do. And so I put it off for several months. I thought, I just don't have the time to do it. It's expensive. You just kind of go through those motions of, it's not me. It's not going to happen to me. It's fine. And I finally, something just told me, let's just do this and get it out of the way. And then we'll be clear. So they did the MRI, and again, found a spot, this time on the left side. They had biopsied the right side the first time, found a spot on the left side. So they said, we're going to have to go in, do biopsy again. So at that point, I'm just thinking, this is nothing. This happened before. It's going to be the same thing on this side that it was on the other side. Really wasn't worried about it. I kind of went into it, as I do with a lot of things in life. We've been through enough struggles and trials that you just kind of have to face it head on and say, it is what it is. And we'll cross that. My mom, one of my mom's favorite phrases, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Right. and I lost a sister to leukemia in 2003. So that was another one of her, she used that phrase a lot too. So we had, so I went in for the biopsy. They ended up needing to do the biopsy in the MRI machine, because they couldn't get even to the spot through a normal biopsy process. So that process in and of itself was stressful. But I really walked out of there that day and I thought, what? I'm not worried about it. It's not going to be anything. It's going to be the same thing as every other time that I've had this done. And it just was becoming old hat to me at that point, because I'd been through it so many times. And so I had the biopsy done, I think, on a Monday, and it was Thanksgiving week. So the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I was at work, and it was late in the day. I hadn't heard anything, and I thought, well, I'm just going to have to go through the weekend, and they'll call me on Monday. And I hadn't even really thought about it a whole lot, because I just, had put it out of my head. And the nurse called me while I was at work, and and she said, hey, I'm calling from Dr. Farr's office and just calling with your biopsy results. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And she sounds all perky. And she said, so unfortunately, I have to tell you, we did find cancer. And I was, it just hits you,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
when you said it just hit me.
Yeah.
I honestly,
Yeah.
That, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's been 3 years. It'll be 3 years this year. And it still hits me.
Mm-hmm.
It's still that kick in the gut.
Yeah.
But God was in control, and we knew that. And we hit it head on. We dealt with it. We grieved it. We were angry.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew that it was really early.
Mm-hmm.
They told me immediately, it's a very small spot. It's very deep against your chest wall. And it was less than like 0.5 centimeters. It was tiny. It was a teeny tiny little spot.
Yeah.
But it was hormone positive. So when they look at these things, they base it off of, fortunately I wasn't triple negative, that's the triple negative breast cancers are really difficult to treat. So she said, in best of the world, you really have the best case scenario. It's small. It's ER and PR positive, HER2 negative. So the HER2 negative is really what you want. That really means something, but you don't want it to be hormone negative and HER negative, because then it causes that triple negative, and those are very difficult to treat. So she said, really, in the scheme of things, it's the best of the scenarios that we could look at this point. So they set me up with Dr. Farr, who was the surgeon that I was going to be seeing, he's a fantastic, wonderful guy. And it helped a little bit that I worked for the medical center, because you have a little bit of an in. And so they were going to set me up for the surgery and things in January. And I said, if there's any way we can get it done here before the end of the year, I mean, here we are in November, if we can do it before the end of the year, that would be great. So I met with him and really kind of had to put some pieces together as to what we wanted to do and how we wanted to proceed, because it was so early, they really were recommending a lumpectomy and radiation. And when I met with him, Dennis and I had talked for years after we lost Mom that if anything ever came up, I was going to have a bilateral mastectomy. I tried to have a bilateral mastectomy after the first biopsy was clear as prophylactic measure, and they wouldn't approve it because I don't have the gene. They do all the genetic testing, and if you have a genetic predisposition, then they can get insurance to cover the prophylactic mastectomy. But I was clear of the gene, and we don't know whether Mom had the gene or not. She was never tested, so we couldn't do it that way. But Dennis and I had always said and made a very clear decision early on that if we ever found anything, I was going to do a bilateral mastectomy without reconstruction. Watching what Mom went through with the reconstruction did it for me. I was like, I don't need to mess with that. So we met with Dr. Farr, and he kind of discouraged that to some extent, which that's his job. That's what he's supposed to do, least invasive, kind of thing. And once I explained that I had lost my mom to sepsis, I lost a sister to sepsis, and watching Mom go through that process, I couldn't put myself there, and I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I didn't want to deal with the mammograms and the ultrasounds and the biopsies and the MRIs and all of that every 6 months. I was done with it. And it's such a personal decision for every woman to know what they can accept and what they can't. Yeah. For me, it really wasn't a decision to be made. It was just, this is what I'm doing, and this is where we're going. And if he wasn't comfortable doing it, I would have found another surgeon that would have, because I felt that strongly that this was what was best for me. And I still do. I don't have any regrets on what I did. So he agreed that, if that's what we wanted, and Dennis was with me, and, he made sure that both of us were involved. And he said, I completely understand your side of this. And, if this is what you want to do, I still want you to meet with plastic surgery. I think it's important for you to talk to them and make sure that you have all of your options before you make a decision. So we did. Didn't really sway me a whole lot one way or the other. I did have, there was a few days right before surgery where I started to kind of question myself. Am I doing the right thing? And Dennis is like, look, we've talked about this, we've been down this road. Don't doubt yourself now. But I think that's all normal parts of the process at that point. So they set me up for surgery in January. And about a week and a half or so later, I got a call and they said, we've got a cancellation on the 20th of December. If you want it, it's yours.
Wow.
And I said, you know what, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's get it over with. I knew I had this beast living and growing, and I knew it was slow growing, and I knew it was small, and I knew it was early, but I also knew it needed to go. And so we wrapped everything together quickly, and I had surgery on the 20th of December of 2017. It was actually very, in the scheme of things, was a very simple. I was only in the hospital one night overnight.
Wow.
Which is incredible. Is still, to me, when I look back at that, I'm like, that major surgery. But we did a bilateral mastectomy, no reconstruction, and I came home the following day. And fortunately for me, it had not spread. There was nothing in the lymph nodes. There was no cancer in the tissue surrounding the tumor. So I was very, very fortunate, but it was all because it was early detection and staying on top of those exams and doing those things. So, I healed fairly quickly, didn't really have any complications from surgery at all. And like I said, I really don't have any regrets whatsoever on the decision that we made. It's a daily reminder of what we went through, but it would have been regardless. You're still scarred. And people have said to me all the time, well, I don't know that I could be that strong, that I could go through that and do that. And I don't necessarily look at it as strength. I think it's just, for me, it was what I felt was right for me. It's a horrible disease, and I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but for me, it was my way of controlling the situation. Right. I wasn't going to let somebody else control what happened to me. I'm going to take it and be done with it. And, it's healed well, and it's, the prosthetics that they have now are great, and, they work. And when I choose to use them, and if I choose not to use them, then I choose not to use them, but for me, I know that the chances of recurrence, doing what I did, it's not zero. It doesn't mean it won't come back.
Right.
And that was the main thing that Dr. Farr and his crew really emphasized to me, is that if you're doing this, if you're making this choice because you think the cancer will never come back, don't choose it because of that. Yeah. Breast cancer doesn't generally come back in the breast. It generally comes back in the bone, the liver, or the brain. Wow. And so if it's going to come back, taking the breast really isn't, the preventative measure isn't that effective. Yeah. But the chances of recurrence in my situation were only about 7% because of the stage of cancer and the grade of cancer that I had. So I started a tamoxifen treatment after surgery and started taking tamoxifen. And that I don't get a huge benefit from that because my chances of recurrence were low to begin with, but they said that it would cut that 7% about in half. So it would take it down to about 3.5%. So it was worth starting the treatment and making sure that I could handle the side effects of the medication, which I have for the most part. But it's, so it'll be, like I said, it'll be 3 years this November since diagnosis and 3 years since surgery. And I haven't had any issues, with anything else at this from a cancer perspective since then. So I give all the credit to the James team, and I can't say enough about the people at the breast center and at the Stephanie Spielman Center, and Dr. Farr and his team. They are just spectacular, and I recommend them to whomever I can talk to go, because it's just they know what they're doing, and they treat the whole body and the whole person, and not just the cancer, which is really, really important.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. You touched on a lot of things in there, and I think for all of us, especially any of us that have been have been close to someone that's dealt with cancer, I think we all have that fear. It gives us that fear of that phone call, that day, that moment. And I can't imagine right before Thanksgiving of all time, because I don't think you're going to forget that time anytime, but right before the holidays, that had to be tough at the time. I appreciate you sharing that so personal level, because I think it's important that we hear that. And as you were talking, I'm thinking, and I think you said it again, so you were going in every 6 months for how many years?
I started that in 2008, so it had been a while.
That's so almost 9 years. Yeah.
9 years. 9 years. Yeah, 9 years.
9 years of just every 6 months. That's a routine dentist visit. And a lot of us can't get that. And not belittling it, or not making a joke at all. I can't get in every 6 months for the dentist, because I always find some reason to not make it in. But to have that kind of commitment for 9 years, and especially as you said, you would think after a few years you're like, this isn't worth the time anymore. And I think that's important that you kept after it. Well,
I think every time I went in, there was something else that came up. I'd have a cyst that needed drained. They'd have to do another ultrasound. They'd have to do extra testing. Multiple times I would come home and think everything was fine, and then I'd get a call later and say, we found something else we need to have you come back and look at. So it was always there in the back of my mind, I think, every time I went, that if I didn't continue to go, that the next time maybe I may regret that. And I think that's kind of when they wanted me to do the MRI, and I put it off for several months, and I finally was like, I can't let myself go there, because I'll never forgive myself if I wait and don't do this, and then down the road we find something and we could have caught it sooner. And I think that's the most important thing that I think every woman has to. It's not a comfortable thing to do. It's not a pleasant thing to do. But I'm still working at my younger sister to get her to do it. But but I think it's just so incredibly important, that because when you can catch these things as early as we were able to catch mine, it's really not that big of a deal anymore. I mean, honestly, from years ago, it used to be a death sentence no matter when they caught it. And I think they've come so far with research and treatments, and that, not that it's not important and it's not significant, because it is, but it's a lot less significant when you can catch it at a grade 1, stage 1 point, and they can get rid of it, and it, you don't have that follow-up stuff to do.
Yeah. So what is your, if you don't mind me asking, what is your current, we said every 6 months, what is your current routine, I guess, for lack of a better term? What is your current path that you have to, how often are you being tested, all those kind of things?
So they don't really test at all, surprisingly. Obviously you can't have mammograms anymore. So, I mean, that's, I know the last one time I went in and saw Dr. Farr, he says, well, I'll see you back in 6 months. And he said, let's have your mammogram first. And I was like, I don't think that's necessary. He was like, oh yeah, that's not necessary. There's really nothing there to scan.
Yeah.
So, but I see him once a year, and then I follow with oncology 6 months in between. So I'm seeing someone every 6 months. Wow. And I will do that for the length of the time that I'm on the tamoxifen. So they just want to continue to follow, but they don't do blood work. They don't do bone scans. They don't, there's really nothing, it's all symptom based. So if I started having bone pain or joint pain or, something to that effect, they would do further testing. But from a breast cancer standpoint, they don't really do any scans, bone scans or anything like that unless you are showing symptoms of a problem. So, the most significant thing for me, unfortunately, was this summer when I managed to break my foot falling out of an ambulance. Yeah, there's not very many people that can say that they've broken their foot falling out of an ambulance.
Right.
My daughter was in the ambulance after a grand mal seizure, and I fell out of the ambulance and fractured my foot.
Oh, no.
Thinking it was no big deal, it's a small fracture. Well, that small fracture turned into a pulmonary embolism that almost killed me.
Oh my goodness.
And 10 days after I broke my foot, I was admitted to the Ross and almost died. And so they have attributed that primarily to my fracture, but also to the tamoxifen use. The tamoxifen tends to make your blood a little more sticky. And that's kind of the nature of how it works. The cancer that I had grew and feeds off of hormones because it was a hormone-based cancer. So the tamoxifen acts as a hormone blocker, and it makes that blood not feasible for the cancer to grow. So, but at the same time, it also makes your blood a little bit stickier to prevent that cancer from catching on and growing. So it was kind of a combination of the two pieces, but so I went off of it for a short time this summer, but they've decided that as long as I'm staying on blood thinners, that I'm better off to continue the treatment with tamoxifen and finish out the 2.5 years with that, and just stay on blood thinners to help prevent the clots from recurring. So, but that was actually I told Dennis, I said, going through breast cancer and surviving that surgery and doing all of those things seemed like a walk in the park after going through what we went through this summer with the embolism, because it was touch and go for 24 hours of whether I was going to pull through this, and I was completely conscious and aware of everything that was happening, but it was a more of an eye-opening, I think, experience for me than the cancer itself, because I knew going into cancer, there's a treatment for this. I know what it is. We know how to fix it. We know what to do to make it go away. And we did. And with this situation, we had no prep. We had no, preparation, no planning, no diagnosis. It was, I blacked out and had to call the squad. And that was, they had to try to figure out what was happening after the fact. And so it really, it made that breast cancer journey seem like a walk in the park in the scheme of things, which is crazy to me. But, it's just such a vivid reminder that life is incredibly fragile, and you just don't know from one second to the next when something's going to happen. And it has nothing to do with cancer, which is, your initial reaction when you find out you have cancer is, oh my goodness, I'm going to die. That's your gut reaction. But I can honestly say, I don't think I ever really worried about that with my diagnosis at that point. I think because I knew it was early, I knew I was following like I should. I knew there was nothing there 6 months ago when I had been in there. Doesn't mean you still aren't scared, but I never really questioned whether I was going to live or die from cancer. It just never really crossed my mind. It was not something that, maybe I just didn't let myself think about that. But then going through this situation, I'm like, oh, so that's what that's like when people think, this is a very distinct possibility. And hearing a doctor say to my husband in the emergency room, if she doesn't have this procedure tonight, she's going to die.
Oh my God.
And you don't know. And so then then I started wondering at that point, before we really knew what was happening, is this a cancer related thing? Is the cancer back, and it's, is it somewhere else and we just didn't know it? And we figured it out very, very quickly. So we didn't have to think about that for long. But a lot of people have asked me that when they found out the journey we've had this summer, do they think that it could be related to your cancer? And I said, no, there's really no correlation other than the medication.
Yeah.
There's no correlation to that, but it really does make you stop and appreciate who you're with. My husband has been my rock from day one and could not have been any more supportive through any of this. And I don't know how people do it that don't have that support. It's so vital to have that support, no matter whether it's a spouse or somebody that you can lean on. And faith. I mean, I think, we leaned on that very, very heavily through both of these journeys. And I think you have to put it into God's hands. And I just bought myself a new t-shirt the other day that said, sometimes the things we cannot change end up changing us.
Wow.
And that to me kind of sums it all up, because it does change you. It changes who you are and how you view life when you go through things like this.
Wow. And I think you touched on that. I think there's times we have in life, and this is certainly an extreme example, but when you're in the midst of it, you just find this other gear that you didn't even think possible. Yep. Until you're out of it, or until somebody says to you, how are you doing this? And you're like, yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it's almost a peace beyond all understanding, the peace that passes all understanding, I should say. Yes. I think, God does give us those things in those times when everyone on the outside of the circle is saying, how are you? If it was me, I would be, right. And then when we're through it, sometimes we look back and we're like, I don't even know how I did that. Like it was, it's find that other next level of peace or fight or grit or tough, any of the words that you want to put in there. You certainly sound like you found that. And the other question I had for you, you mentioned the summer, and I wasn't aware of that story as well. This is just because it's a topic now. Has COVID? Have you had to? Have you had to be very careful with? Are you susceptible? You know what I mean? Does that? Yeah. Has COVID changed anything for you?
Yeah, I was considered. I mean, obviously, when you have, I had a significant number of blood clots in my lungs. And so my lungs were very compromised from the beginning. So I was tested 3 times, twice while I was in the hospital, and then I've been tested again since then. But yeah, that was a major concern. And when I blacked out that night, I really started to think that that's maybe what was happening, is that I had contracted. I felt okay. But I didn't have the symptoms, any of the symptoms of COVID, but they tested me right away when they got me to the ER. And so, yeah, I've had to be more cautious and more vigilant about protecting myself, because it's, you don't want to, with compromised lungs, the last thing you want is to compromise another way. And so I was, I'm breathing fairly, mostly 99% normally now. That happened on the 7th of July. So it did take a while before my lungs finally were back to where I felt like I could take a deep breath again. But COVID definitely played a part. And I will say that I think the biggest thing for us from a COVID perspective was just the fact that we couldn't have visitors at the hospital. And you won't realize until that happens how much you rely on that, and how important it is to have that support there with. And Dennis was able to be with me from 2:00 till 7:00 every day, and that was it. Yeah. And but he had to be super careful too, because he's coming into a hospital with, there may be a COVID patient in the room next door. You just don't know. So, but yeah, the COVID thing definitely complicated the whole situation. And it wouldn't have probably otherwise, from a cancer perspective, it wouldn't have made a difference. But from this perspective, yeah, it definitely was a concern, and still is. We just have to be super careful. Right.
And I think that's why some of us have to remember we got to wear a mask. It's not, we may feel fine, our kids may be fine, and but stories like yours are reasons why we need to, because we just need to be aware of those and those things. So this has flown by. It goes so fast. I always just get so wrapped up in the story. Before we go, what resources would you recommend to anyone? Are there any links if anyone is concerned? Or I know you mentioned the James and the Speaking Foundation. Is there any of those kind of things, or maybe something that was helpful to you that anyone that may hear this Can you share any of those kind of things? And I'll make sure I include them in the YouTube post and the blog and everything else, but any links or organizations that were very helpful to you?
Yeah, I think probably for me, the biggest one was just getting involved with somebody at the James and having that connection there, because they just really, I mean, that's where I started my treatments and exams and everything from the beginning. And they really do treat the whole person and not just the cancer. And I think for me, it was, they were concerned about my psychological well-being and my physical well-being and my relationships. And they ask about all of that, and they offer services for all of that. And the services that they offer after the surgery and after the treatment are just incredible. The support groups that they offer, there's classes that you can take, art classes and kinds of things. They offered 6 sessions of massage after surgery. I went through some physical therapy. So just the resources that they offer you, and if you do have problems, you know who to reach out to.
Yeah.
The other thing that I got involved in, not too long after, it was in the spring after my surgery in December, was at the Y. There's a program called Live Strong, and it's for cancer survivors. It's a strength building program for cancer survivors, and it's a 12-week free program. Wow. I don't know whether they're still doing it right now. They probably are not right now with all the COVID stuff going on. But there was a group of about 10 or 12 and it was all women, and all different types of cancer. So not just breast cancer, it was all different types of cancer. And we met twice a week for 12 weeks at the Y, and did, all kinds of strength building. They kind of let us try all the different kinds of exercise, from the equipment to yoga classes to dance classes to swim or water aerobics in the course of that 12 weeks, and made some really, really great connections with other women that had been through it. Some of them still going through it, and we've kept those relationships going since then, and we keep in touch through text. And we were doing breakfasts for a long time together, like once a month, but haven't been able to do that lately. But that for me was a huge help in just kind of getting moving again, and starting to feel like I was building some strength and endurance, because it doesn't take long for that to knock you down when you've had surgery like that. So I've recommended that program to lots and lots of people, because I just think it's such a huge benefit for overcoming both the mental piece of it and the physical piece of it.
Wow. Perfect. Those are all great resources, and I think your story is a powerful one that, again, I don't know who's going to hear this, see it,
right,
do it, but I do hope that if it changes one person or helps one person or guides one person, I just keep thinking as you were talking, the only word that I can think of is warrior, and we hear that a lot, or battling cancer, and those are phrases that we hear a lot, but I just the fact that you would go every 6 months. Especially when it was almost, it almost probably felt like, and I know we've already said this, but I just want to come back to it. It probably almost felt like this is not necessary. This is, there's probably other things you could have been doing, but you stayed diligent, even, without the fear or thought that this could happen. You stayed after it. And then the other thing that really I took away from what you said is, I used this phrase last night. It's an uninvited guest. No matter what form of cancer it is, it's not invited, it's not wanted. It's so I was thinking of that as you were talking about, the decisions that you all had to make, how you were going to go through what process and why you would do that. And it's almost like this person in your house and you want them out. I didn't invite you in the first place, but not to sound rude, but it's I didn't want you in the first place in my home. Get out. That's would be I think that would be my my thought on it would be, get out, like you're not welcome here. And whatever that means or looks like, then that's what we got to do, and evict it in a way from your home. And so I applaud you for those tough decisions you guys had to make too, as a family and even individually. So
and I think really the thing for me, I think I struggled with the most, not necessarily was my own feelings and my own thoughts on this, was watching Dennis go through it, because, and I remember that with my dad too, that when my mom was diagnosed, it is such a challenge for the man in the relationship to deal with this. You know, by nature, you want to fix things. And when things come up, you want to fix it, and it can't be fixed. Right. And I think we both really struggled with that, because he, I know, felt guilt, which he shouldn't have, but you do, you know, and the fact that he had to watch me go through all of this, and not be able to fix it and make it go away. Right. And I finally just had to say to him at one point, you can't fix this, and it's not yours to fix. You know, there's people here to fix this, but it's not you. But that it was really, really exhausting for, you know, for both of us, because I kind of went through the same thing this summer, you know, going through what we went through this summer, and just that, you know, I would be the same way, I think, if the tables were turned. But we're more of the nurturer, whereas he's more of the, I want to fix it and make it go away. Right. And so I would say that, you know, when people are faced with this, make sure that you're recognizing that piece of it with your spouse or significant other, and really taking care of them at the same time that you're taking care of yourself, because you both go through it. It's not just the cancer patient that goes through this. It's all of you together that go through it.
Right. And I could understand that, I think, because so many of us, you know, embrace or want our role as the provider protector, and we couldn't do either. I provide a solution, and I can't protect, you know, my spouse in this time. That would be very difficult. So I can understand that from his perspective, certainly. That would be really hard. But at the same time, that's really powerful. What you said is that, you know, make sure you take care of others. I don't worry about me, like, take care of you, you know. That's the best thing I need. Is I would need my spouse at 100%, or, you know, whatever we get back to. But that's amazing that you would think of your spouse in the midst of that fire too. That's really amazing. So just an incredible story. And I'm so thankful that it has been good news. Right. I'm gonna be cheering every 6 months when you go back, that we continue to have, you know, great news moving forward. And I appreciate your outlook, all the information and all the feedback. And again, I hope that this helps even one person.
Right. Absolutely.
Then it's worth, you know, coming on and sharing your story. And I know we don't know each other well, and so for you to come on and share that with in essence, a complete stranger is, and then anybody that would hear it or see it, that'll be a stranger as well. That takes a lot of courage on your part, and I'm honored that you would do that for this and for anybody that might see it. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. Absolutely. Well, you all will be in our prayers. I know Heather's close, and and so I'm sure she will continue to keep me updated on anything as well. But you know, God bless you. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being with us tonight. All right. Thanks, Aaron. Have a great evening. All right. You too. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.